It's not always a straight line to having a child. I think you kind of sold the idea that it is, that you just have sex without a condom and then a baby appears. But lots of young families and lots of my friends who are trying to have kids have gone for a couple of years trying and struggling to conceive. So much so that after doing this podcast, I started telling some of my friends, I actually think it's a good idea to start freezing your eggs, embryos, sperm. Because if it is going to get increasingly harder, then there might need to be medical interventions, IVF, etc., for me and my friends, if we want to have families. But the problem is as well, at like 33 years old, if you look at the data, you're not at your peak necessarily in terms of fertility. You're somewhere coming down the slope as a man, but also as a woman. And so you're kind of fighting time a little bit, it feels like.
Yeah, you are.
And I think my partner feels the same way, that we wish we were told a little bit earlier about family planning. And then I hear about these fertility issues that apparently are being caused by toxins and the sort of chemicals in our environment. You have spent a long time thinking, writing, talking about this.
Yes.
I guess the first question is why? Why is a guy that's known for managing billions and billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, talking about fertility and this sort of baby bust?
Well, starting 27 years ago with the foundation, we were committed to start thinking about everything to do with the climate. And you're moving in the right circle then, because the next thing is we started to worry about the cataclysmic decline in insects. I don't know if you're aware of this, but insects appear to have dropped in biomass, the weight of the flying insects, by 50 to 75%.
Really?
In the last 60, 70 years. And E.O. Wilson, the famous Ant-Man, he believed that, nature could handle the loss of humans easily, effortlessly, but it could not handle the loss of insects. That insects are, in a sense, he felt, and his fellow experts, he represented them as thinking the same way, that insects are the bedrock of nature. And if they start to go out of business, then the birds who feed on them and the amphibians, they start to decline, which they have done, also catastrophically. One thing leads to another, and the beetles are no longer recycling the forest floor, and eventually things won't grow, and no one to fertilize the plants, and the damage spreads. And he felt that eventually loss of insects would lead to a more or less complete failure of nature, and we would inherit a planet that was no longer conducive to humans. We noticed that some of the same effects are felt by humans. And a report came out, Shana Swan and Haggai Levine, I think it finished in 2011, and it made the case that sperm count had been dropping, had almost halved since the first reports, academic reports in 1970. So I immediately said, this has the feeling of something that is really important. We got to study the data, and the results came out suggesting that the decline rate was accelerating. The decline rate this year is 2.5% a year. You don't have to be mathematically that literate to realize that a 2.5% decline in your sperm count every year is a disastrous level, a non-sustainable level, right?
How long is that going to take for my sperm to basically not work?
As far as we can tell, our best guess is that in hunter-gatherer days, we had 180 million units per milliliter of sperm. And when the academics came in 1970, it was down to about 100. And today it's 35, okay? Also the quality and the motility, they call it, had also declined, somewhat similarly. And it turns out, luckily for us, that we were over-engineered, I like to say like a great Victorian bridge. Nature doesn't take any risks, and you have more than you need. And it appears, again, a good guess is about 45 million units is what you need to be able to get pregnant without any difficulty. And that was hit about 15 to 20 years ago. The number of young couples who needed help 15 or 20 years ago was nil, basically. And for this reason, that none of them had a chronic lack of sperm count in round numbers. And now the World Health says it's about 17%. Okay, 17% of young couples could use some help today, which means that instead of just trying for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, you're trying for months and months. And everybody knows people now who fall in that category, which is exactly what you would expect if you've gone from 0 to 17%. But this is the killer. Shana Swan and my colleague and I kind of thought about this thing separately and independently, and we worked out, doesn't take a great brain, that in 20 to 25 years, the average young couple will need help. I mean, this is tomorrow. This is not 200 years from now. In 20 to 25 years, the average young couple will need help getting pregnant.
Dr. Swan's projection indicates that if the current rate of decline continues unchecked, the median male sperm count is on track to hit 0 by 2045.
Wow. Yeah. That means the median couple is not going to have children without a lot of help.
It means half the male population will have 0 viable sperm, and the remaining half will be right on the edge of functional infertility.
A few of them will still have plenty, and maybe 10% who are really perfectly in decent condition, because there's a huge distribution range today. There are people today who still have 200 million, better than the hunter-gatherers. But it's...
And what is causing this, and how do we stop it?
Shana would say the environment around you of mainly plastics. Plastics are leaching toxins, and the particles of plastics you have in your brain and in your body, which we now know is quite substantial, are also leaching toxins. And these toxins are what they call endocrine disruptors. They mess with your hormones. You should expect them to lower your fertility. And yet, the people who specialize in fertility problems and write books about it, none of them mention toxicity. They mention the 100 perfectly solid reasons why people are choosing to have fewer children.
Endocrine disrupting chemicals like phthalates, which are found in cosmetics, shampoos, food packaging, etc. They actively lower testosterone production in male fetuses during the first trimester, permanently stunting reproductive capacity before birth.
Yes.
BPAs, which are what they call biphosphonates.
Yes, something like that.
Used to make plastics hard, line tin cans, and coat thermal store receipts. They are synthetic estrogens. They flood the male body with female hormone signals, crashing sperm count and motility. PFAs, forever chemicals used in non-stick pans, Teflons, waterproof rain jackets, and stain-resistant carpets. They break down in nature, accumulate in human blood, and are directly linked to lower sperm volume. And then the microplastics you talked about, the Trojan horse. One of the shocking things that I read was that it's been discovered that they are physically embedded in human placentas.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Breast milk and human testicles. And there was a major study I think we all heard about in 2024 that found microplastics in 100% of human testicular tissues tested. 100%. And lastly, biological stresses. So me and you being sat down on these chairs heats our testicles to a point where the sperms die. Heated car seats, hot laptops, they actively cook the sperm. And lastly, obesity.
Yes. And of course, smoking you somehow slipped through the net.
Yeah.
But there is a whole other branch, pesticides on your food. Now, if you give me time, I'll tell you about these 2 little studies. They're very small, and you might ignore them, except they were done by Harvard and Mass General, which is a candidate for the best hospital in America. And they had a clinic for people having problem getting pregnant, and they ran it out of that. They had 180 men, and they got them to self-report on what they were eating. Were they eating the dirty dozen? Were they eating melons and bananas that have lots of protection? At the end of 6 months, the guys who reported to eat the least bad versus the quarter that at the worst, there was a doubling of sperm count. Can you believe it? At the top category, the more fruit and veggies you ate, the better your sperm count. In the bottom quartile, the more they ate, the worse their sperm count. It was a dramatic result, but 2 to 1 between the top and the bottom. And then 2 years later, they did a very similar study with women who were having trouble. And at the end of their 9 months of self-reporting, the ones who ate the least badly had 68% successful live births, bearing in mind this was a fertility clinic, and the bottom quartile, 38%. So once again, nearly double.